All right, so we're back with Chop It Up, episode 3. I'm Juan Escobar, and it's my friend Austin James. And so today we bring an interesting topic. We'll be addressing sin. So we won't be too heavy. That's right. Yeah. So
we need the little bros reminding of us. Good thing that door's locked.
Yeah, I know. So something may happen. We never know. So we're talking about sin today, and I like that in this book, Dallas Willard kind of brings like a nuanced view of it. I haven't heard before reading this book, right, it being termed or coined just being a ruined soul, right? The ruined soul, and that's the effect that sin has on us as our human selves. So if you ever hear us talk about the lost soul or the ruined soul, that's kind of what we mean, is that the sin that has, I guess, messed up the soul. So
yes.
Any more thoughts on that?
I was just saying that's essentially kind of a foundational thought just like kind of vocabulary that I think will be built on for the rest of the book. And then were you wanting at this point to kind of compare that with how you'll see commonly in the church that you hear about how we're a sinner in need of grace, this whole concept of ruined soul versus that concept? Or
Yeah. So, I mean, my question to you would be like, how does hearing that you're a ruined soul now change the view of yourself as compared to when you hear, you're a sinner saved by grace?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because that's what I was just saying too, is that that's a thought you hear in the church, and then like you were saying, Juan, that he has this nuanced view about how he describes a ruined soul, and so that's what I was going to describe from the book, is that why he says that it's like from our intrinsic greatness that a person makes this ruined condition. And also he kind of brings up some stuff from G.K. Chesterton, and then he gets this thought too that you said about us, that it's even like a grace that God gives us, that he's hidden the majesty of the human soul from us to prevent us from being vanity. So you could even say that's like the initial deception. You could even say when you're thinking about Lucifer, is his vanity is what creates pride. Because he had vanity no matter what, but seeing it through that light turned his beauty into vanity, thus corrupting his core, creating pride. And so that's where he gets his final thought that I like too about his kind of explanation of a ruined soul, is that sin does not make it, as far as the human life, does not make the human life worthless, but only lost, and that its lostness is still capable of great strength. So you notice even the analogy I even made with thinking of Lucifer is there were these good characteristics, there was these strengths that are about our humanity. Like I kind of like to say, like me being human, I am the visible image of an invisible God. So even just seeing it at that level without taking any kind of royalty words in it, like I'm a son, I'm a prince, but just simply saying like humanity, I even use the term image bearers. We're all image bearers of God. So I like his language of saying, the soul is just kind of ruined. That would even say too, there's a C.S. Lewis quote, you don't know what a corrupted apple is unless you know what a fully formed, healthy apple is. So I like his idea of the ruined soul gets in that. You don't know what a ruined soul is unless there's a healthy image bearer soul that's about things. So I like that better in saying like there's like spoiled milk, there's a corruption there, instead of this identity term, sinner. You need grace.
Right.
And so the church saying that, I like that. You got some stories about that too, Juan. But my kind of final thought is when you say you're a sinner that needs, and you needed, and you need grace continually, it kind of keeps you in perpetual spiritual kind of huggies. That I always needs this. I'm a damsel in distress. Okay. I need to get back to basics. Save me, save me, save me, save me. I'm poisoned, I'm poisoned, I'm poisoned. There's no progression. Yes, you do stumble. Yes, there's mistakes. But what I'm addressing that's a little too extreme that the church is about to lie is making identity statement. So that's the point I'm trying to get at, is like when you make
Yeah.
that an identity statement, you're thus encapsulating this spiritual baby, spiritual hugginess that the church needs to learn. Yes, that's what it starts out as. That's what you get saved from. But there needs to be a progression in the language. So maybe we shouldn't just fall in love with this term. But I know you also have some cool analogies with that as well.
Yeah. So I think I've shared before, especially on that testimony video, how I've had experiences with like different denominations, right? And so, you know, I remember being in like one men's group where, you know, we were addressing sins, right? And so, but I remember just kind of feeling that it was like how I would describe it, like a repetitive cycle of like confession, right? And it would just end there, you know, but me, I'm more inclined to being optimistic, you know, and just wanting to get over the hump. And so I think for me, that was just, it wasn't that it was discouraging, but still it was almost like hopeless in the fact that I felt like we had no maybe vision of something greater that could bring us out of this. It almost felt like we were like doomed. We were like, what's that one saying with like, if you don't know your history, like you're doomed to repeat it, right? Like
Yeah.
kind of that concept of just like, we just felt we were doomed to repeat the same things we were struggling with. So yeah, and I think we talked about it earlier, just how that was just even different about how you know, I grew up, was that I grew up in this like holiness church, and so I think we kind of like pursued holiness, so it made us kind of have like this movement attitude of like, hey, like we had this goal, we intend to pursue our relationship with God so that we can be holy, and it's Him who's doing it, right? And so I felt like you kind of had this fighting mentality of like, hey, I won't give up. And so like I use the comparison of like, you know, I would just ramp up the energy of like, hey, if what worked in trying to achieve holiness didn't work, well, like let me try a little bit harder, you know, like ramp up the energy, you know, to get to it, you know. So yeah, so I just had that fighter mentality of like, hey, like I'm gonna overcome this. And so I think that was just like the I guess the conflict there for me was just like, I just felt like there in the men's group, you know, it was more of like this passive and more like this passive position to the situation, and you know, a lot of condemnation there, you know, and you'd stay stuck in the condemnation, like you wouldn't realize, hey, like we're more than that, we have more power than we think we do, you know. So so yeah, I think that's kind of why I just like this view that Dallas takes on sin, because it's a more holistic approach to viewing sin. Like, you know, we talked about earlier, like just what the human self is. Like we're just like this Russian doll of parts that make us into this soul. And so like when you say a ruined soul is like, it's this thing that needs healing. It's ruined. It needs to be regenerated. It needs to be reformed in order to you know, be its original purpose. So you're not stuck in this identity state. You already are this thing, except you've been ruined. So you can be restored. You can be restored to your original purpose, you know. And so I think that's why I love this, because it's more holistic. and it's more of this concept of a healing process than this, hey, I'm stuck. No, it's not that I suck, right? But like, I'm stuck in my failure here. Like, someone come rescue me, please. So that's my view on it. So I don't know if you have any thoughts to add on that.
Now, I was just thinking you were saying that, yeah, you're kind of in the process. You're becoming what you are. So that was a quote like through from Saint, Augustine, Saint Augustine, is become what you are. If you are just like they said to like this onion with layers to you that have been corrupted. And I was even hearing the word when you're saying healing. There's healing, then that means you can recover. If you
Yeah.
realize you have an infection, you recover from the infection, then you can now live as a healthy individual. So that
Right.
was my whole, initial thought too, is that we are in this process, and the process did start by God's grace, but we do have to acknowledge healing. And I think our terminology can keep us in a baby mindset when we need to give God praise for when healing does happen to get us to those next levels of maturity. Like me and you commonly say, like you starting to say it more too, but we've leveled up in our certain personal lives. I like to think in that way too.
For sure. So moving on to the next question. Why do you think the modern church tiptoes around sin? And then, obviously there's those churches that charge head into it. And it seems like a lot of people despise those type of churches.
Yeah, you're a little more familiar with the latter, but I
Yeah,
can kind of more
for
approach the
sure.
former. But
Yeah.
first, I want to say too is like how I think even the initial example of like the passive church you described that tiptoes around sin. I think obviously there's internal issues, but I think also externally what can paralyze a church is how powerful society's voice can be. So it's like it's the other side of the equation that makes when one side dominates the other, that's the case. And I think what Dallas does a good job describing too, he gives a subtitle. It's called Evil That's Now a Non-Category. So it's just not something we're going to talk about. We're not going to put a label on it. But he gives this analogy of the farmer that I really like, that I've equated to like why society engages in public service and PSAs about certain moral failures that humans enact in. But he gave his analogy of what I was saying about the idea behind a public service announcement being the extension of knowledge and good and evil, of like more knowledge. But he gets into that. He says, we're like farmers who diligently plant crops but cannot admit the existence of weeds and insects, or what you call evil, and can only think to pour on more fertilizer. So similarly, the only solution we know to human problems today is education. So the weeds and insects he's talking about, we're not acknowledging the evil. All we're acknowledging, like in a farming analogy, is education, 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 which is good. And he goes on to later say that, but it doesn't diagnose the problem, and it doesn't even and that's the key too, and what we'll get even too further to what's helpful to diagnose the problem. But when you don't diagnose the problem, you're for sure not going to get rid of the problem. No matter how much, in a sense, growth and quote unquote goodness. So that's why I say it's an extension of the knowledge of good and evil. That tree, what our first ancestors partook in, is that when we get to that point where we divorce ourselves from the good, we become evil. That's I think the embodiment of being evil is when you don't realize where your goodness come from. So then you even get this distorted view of what evil is. And so that's why I love the simple farm analogy of like, when you don't acknowledge these weed and insects, then yeah, you become this delusional force that we'll later describe to. But I think because that's the society we live in and that's how they go about things, that is the generation of those that are under the curse of the tree, that tree of just more and more knowledge, perfecting yourself through behavior, is that if you don't have a strong internal church, then you can get paralyzed if that is what you're dealing with. But how you can get paralyzed, because we would believe the church will always have the power to overcome the world, is if you don't believe who you say you are. So I just said earlier, in our personal growth, we're leveling up, we're becoming what we are. So if you're a church that doesn't believe you are a family of brothers and sisters that are operating in the spirit of power, love, and a sound mind that the Holy Spirit brings, the gates of hell will prevail against you. You will be overcome by this world that preaches constantly, don't say this, political correctness, canceling. So that's why I call secular culture, they're the pagan prophets of our culture. We're always getting preached at all throughout our entertainment mediums to think a certain way.
Yeah,
And some of it
absolutely.
has some truth to it, and other of it's just openly pagan, openly evil, openly against God.
Right.
So you're not going to deal with that if you're not a church that believes what you are. If you're the church, you're people of God's word, you're people of unity, you're people of love. So then to address the other, there's probably a much quicker answer in the sense of like, obviously, there's only way you can go. On this end of the pendulum, you're getting paralyzed by a dominant world. You can then, if so you're just a doormat, the other one is to be, okay, now we got to get militant. Let's fight back. The world is against us. The world is our enemy. We got to fight them. Get your bulletproof vest on. Let's tell these sinners. So now you're like, we don't call ourselves a sinner. They're the
Yeah,
sinners. You
right.
don't point the finger. So I'm a sinner, victim mentality. I'm a sinner in need of grace. It's let's go get the sinners. How many souls can we win? Jesus with the machine gun grenade launcher with them is like, let's Holy Spirit, cocktail all these dudes. It gets into that mindset where you dominate the culture, you abuse your power, and you dominate because you are the stronger power in the dynamic, but there's no love.
Yeah.
So that's what I was saying too, that the healthy church is going to be this family unit. They're going to see each other. The men and women are going to see the brothers and sisters. There's going to be structure. There's going to be leadership. But if it's all mission minded without realizing these are human beings that, like our
Yeah.
first question, have a ruined soul that have the greatness of God within them, if they're only exposed for their evil, if we only look at the wheat, if we don't see a plant too, if we start seeing people, like in the farm analogy, as weed and insects, then you start treating them like you would do to weeds and nicks. You start uprooting people, you start crushing them, and they don't see truth in the proper lens. Because to see truth, since you're evil, when you're blind, you can't understand it. When you're in darkness and someone shines a light right in your face, it's going to blind you. And that's why there
Yeah.
has to be a slow simmer of the truth and the light to really understand these concepts. So yeah, if you're avoiding one ditch and not being paralyzed, the other ditch is to avoid dominating the culture, because we are the stronger force. We are in truth. We have love. But if they don't see that love, they'll never understand where we're coming from. But I still think in regard, if you're saying something that's true, no matter how you say it, truth always can permeate no matter what. I think it is key to always be in truth. But
Yeah, I
I think
agree.
that's how the two ditches in the world we live in.
Yeah, I agree. So, what would you say? Because I mean, I know there's the extremes, right? Like, how would you kind of define, like in a simple way, like how would you define the? Because I know the one I experienced, right, growing up, I would say, um, yes, we were the militant. Like, we weren't militant where we went out and actively sought people, but within the church, for sure, we would address, you know, sin in such a way where um, we made consequences clear, right? Like there was the church disciplines, and then maybe there would be preachers that would actively call it out, and so I think that instilled fear because of that into the congregation. I don't know if I can be a fair judge to say it was a healthy fear of God or not, but definitely fear was in there. And so I think but maybe it was an extreme because the consequences of doing that actually made people maybe be afraid of confessing their sins. So they would hide their
Yeah.
sins, not tell anyone about it. And then, you know, they would criticize other people, judge other people, and would end up turning into gossip, right? So something that I didn't agree with and never felt that, like, hey, if we're the body of Christ, we're supposed to live in harmony, love each other. don't think that's the way to go about sin, right? So, yes, calling out sin is necessary. I think it's the essence of the gospel, you know. So,
Yeah,
like,
truth.
I
Yeah,
think,
rebuke.
yeah, I think that's part of it, you know. But you know, I think that was what I saw was an extreme. So I don't know. It seems like we're on opposite ends. So, you know, like, what would you
Mm-hmm.
say was a result of that extra that camp that you were in? What was the results of that extreme, maybe?
All like we're talking about is that with our first question is that you lead to these people that never grow if you're not, because in John 15 it talks about how the gardener prunes the vines so they can be more fruitful. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
never going through times of suffering, if you're never going through times of getting rebuked or corrected, even though those are tough times and there needs to be discernment when that happens, those are critical times in growth. Because it happens so rarely, because it's so tough the time to do. I can remember the all the times in my life that's ever happened to me in a sense, especially in a spiritual climate that those happen. But yeah, if you're not a church that's calling out sin, you're definitely not internally doing it through church discipline. So then you do create members that you're back row Baptist, or that whole term,
Mm-hmm.
or sideline Christians.
Yeah, I
People
remember
that
hearing that.
they're not in the
Yeah,
game, they're in the
yeah,
pews, on the sidelines. You create these Christians that are not in the game, they're not in the race, they're not joining the mission because they got big old fat heads and they have undeveloped legs and arms in every part of their body because
yeah.
they're not moving, they're not engaging, they're not going. So you create a culture that doesn't fight for holiness, doesn't fight against sin, or doesn't preach against sin. Is for those like that dynamic was perfect, because the same thing happens when you don't preach against it. Is that because there's not a culture of confessing? Just if there's a lot of culture of confessing, and you don't want to be ones that messed up. If you're not confessing at all, then you'll be the awkward one if you ever confess. So I'd say there's even more that don't want to confess when you don't have a culture of church discipline. And then if you are confessing, then there can be that culture of, because you're not really dealing with the sin, that you may feel something both ways. You'll feel defective even if you are
Right.
confessing. You'll feel like this sinner that desperately needs it, and you'll just be in that perpetual victim mentality even if you do openly engage with that. So I think you create members that can fall in either of those camps. There's a little, it's more of like a very, it's less fear than what people on that side of the road, the legalistic side, would do as far
Mm-hmm.
as not confessing. But I think that's even more dangerous, that they're not even wrestling with the fact that they need to confess their sin. To that
Yeah.
one, that's where where the term, if you're going to say on one side is legalistic, the other side is what's called hyper grace, that you're giving yourself a license to sin. So at that point, the people in that camp that are not confessing, because it's a culture of that, they're essentially no different than the world. And that's why I was even making the joke earlier too, before we on air, about lukewarm. Like that's what's known as a lukewarm Christian,
Yeah.
cultural, carnal, different phrases for it. That, can we even say the word Christian should be after all those phrases when they're no different than the world?
Right.
Because at least the world preaches. I says the world, when they're openly accepting secular values, they're very, very prophetic, or at least the leaders are.
Yeah. So as we were saying this, you know, I hope we don't come off judgmental. You know, I mean, I think these are just observations we've made, you know, within our circumstances. So just want to put that out there. What do you think? Like, I mean, I
Yeah,
could see
that
someone taking us
anything could happen.
as
Yeah.
judging the church, but I mean, we're just taking this from what we've read in this book and then using our experiences kind of just to be able to give ourselves some data to look off of, right? So I think this is, you know, not meant to be in that order. So
It's not even like if we literally even had these experiences. These are just logical points you can make. It's like, hey,
right,
this is what it would look like if you took grace too far. And hey,
right,
this is what it would look like if you took holiness too far. These are just very easy generalizations that everyone can make, but it's just they have to be said, because
yeah,
they're the ditches in thought if you're going to talk about
right,
these issues. So they have
right,
to be acknowledged. But we do have specific examples of how we kind of seen that play out. So it helps color in the lines a little bit better by
right,
giving examples of sometimes when leaning towards each of those areas.
yeah, yeah. Just to be aware of too, right? Because I mean, I feel like that we can naturally walk into those areas as well, if we're not careful. So
For sure.
the whole reason why we're even talking about this in the first place is like we should be aware of our, areas where we are unaware of our sin that's present in our lives. So, I mean, if we're being constantly sanctified, that means there is parts of our ruined soul that need to be healed again, So, like,
oh yeah,
you know,
that's those things too. Is like why
it
we're
goes hand in hand.
commanded to work out our salvation in fear and trembling.
Right.
Key
Yeah.
aspect.
Well, cool. So I got another question for you then. So this is kind of like a rhetorical question. So we know pride is deceitful, and I guess how can we be on guard for it? But to add on to that, I would say, do the nuances that Dallas Willard described of being lost, and even the character of the loss, make you more optimistic in the fight against sin?
Yeah, because kind of like I was saying earlier too, is that you got to be aware of it, and you kind of brought up pride too, of like its deceptiveness is even through self-obsession. But I like the particular. I mean, that's literally what his subtitle is of what I'm going to put. His definitions of lost is he titles it "lost," quote unquote, means self-obsession. And I was already saying that about pride, but I'd almost want to say pride is essentially self-obsession, because that can either be ultra condemnation or ultra elevation of gifts above the corporate effort. But I love his definitions he kind of gives about lostness. And he starts off by saying, lost persons in Christian terms are precisely the ones who mistake their own person for God. Because we're a body, and we do incorporate certain aspects of Godhood in us, but there's only a certain image of it. But it's through the collective image that we are God. We are his image.
Sure.
So that's, I think, the point he's trying to make. I was like, yes, we're godly. Yes, we are part of the family. But I think the point he's trying to make is like, when you say as a one individual, as a hand, so in the body of God saying, I am the I am, that's what he's trying to say is like, that is truly being lost when you've made yourself the center of the universe. So he goes further to say, like, when you do that, like he specifically says, everything becomes delusional. Because even just that simple thought too of like in the physical sense of making the spiritual analogy, like by saying if you said a finger was an entire human body, that's a incredibly illogical thing to say. So I think in the spiritual, that since that's what Dallas is trying to talk about, how it's delusional by saying I'm just a singular image of the triune God. And so for me to say I am that from all of eternity, like me singular, this consciousness, that's what he's trying to get, is like that's extremely delusional to say. And then he further says that that you become delusional and you have no confidence that in the one who is really God. And we've seen such ones do not fit to center their knowledge upon God. Like this is what lost individuals do, is that they don't have confidence in that about who God says he really is. And that's not the apex, as we were saying, the center. It's not the apex of their knowledge, that God being God. He'll say that term a decent amount too through what he describes in this chapter. Just lost people don't allow God to be God. They like God when he's a genie, when he gives them stuff, but they don't like God being, because God does genie-like things. He does give, he does share, he does bless, but usually someone that's lost only wants that aspect. They're takers, and Dallas gets in that too. But one final thought too that I thought was really good is it's just really kind of more sobering, is that talks about that thought I was just saying too about being takers, is that if they don't get what they want with being a taker, the worst thing about that is that they're constantly taking, and that they're not even able, in a sense, like not steal, but get something they want, because that's what their life is dependent on. They become angry and depressed. So either angry at that person, or they internalize the anger and just give up on being a human being a source of life. And just, this is the sobering thought, that at that point, they're a danger to themselves and to others. And that's what we were talking about earlier at the beginning of that. That's the true ruinness of human life, is that we have so much greatness, we have so much power about us, but if that's turned either inwardly or outwardly, that's what even me, Juan, I've seen too, is that I tend to more lean on going through those depressive cycles of that. I turn that lostness, that lack of letting God lead control, I turn that inwardly, and that can lead to a lot of depression. I've seen with
Yeah.
Juan, that can be sometimes outwardly, and that can be struggling with anger. And that even reflects back. It's outward anger, but then it ends up destroying him inwardly too. And obviously through my focus first by inwardly, it destroys others by what I'm not able to give them through friendship, or
Mm.
even through maybe their sadness of them even seeing me in a depressed cycle. So
Mm.
that's how, that can destroy others too, even when we make it all about ourselves. But when he said that, I found that very sobering. So that's what I say is that even the answer really isn't to say something grandiose. The answer really in this question of like, how can I be optimistic about it? It's just, it's good to know what your fight is. It's
Mm.
good to know what the struggle is. It's good to know what that does to people, to say, I really do. The whole answer is, or the whole question is, are you going to submit? And that's the whole thing pride doesn't want to do, is it wants to be the sinner. So I
Right.
think it's really good for the human soul. It makes me optimistic to know about the pessimism that the human soul will engage in the destruction it will cause when you do live a life of pride. So for me, that's what makes me optimistic, is like, hey, this battle can be won is simply if you just call things for what they are. You own up to your own mistakes. When you know these kind of patterns, like, hey, this is a pattern I exhibit. So when I do it again, I ask for help, or I admit I did it. So then, circumstances don't lead to another moment like that. But I found I can be optimistic of when I know about the darkness. So then I can seek to either change my way of thinking that led to it,
Yeah.
or
Exactly.
depend on others for help.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm agreeing with that. And so, kind of just to bring in my kind of perspective too, I think that, um, man, just being obsessed on the self is so easy to do, and almost like what you're programmed kind of to do here in America. Just um, I guess it is an individualistic country, right? And so that already sets you off on just focusing on yourself, and just with it being the American dream, right? Like the immigrant has this allure of the American dream. So like come here, like
Mm,
work hard, and just you can reach for the stars, And so like I think that's kind of just another way that you just fall like in this achievement trap, this trap of trying to see what you can do to make something of yourself. And so, and not that that's like entirely a bad thing, right? Like I think even just me, as I would consider myself an achiever, someone that's goal oriented, right? So like that's just how I go about life and I approach life. So you know, to say it's completely wrong would be say like, hey, like that's changing my soul. Like that's just like you're asking me to be something that I'm not, And
mm,
so, um, but knowing that, like I know that that's why I'm even just all the more susceptible to this, right? To be prideful, to want to be in control of my life, and so I really like this passage uh, that he brings brings in about Edith, or made by Edith Schaefer, and it talks about um, abortion, and it's a interesting take because
mm,
she she does address like the abortion of life, but also like how we abort other things in life, not just having a baby and aborting it, but we can abort um, something as you know um, aborting a wife's need for a husband, or
mm.
aborting the husband's need for a companion and friend. And so I really resonated with this one sentence, and I'll read a couple here, but it says this new way of thinking, uh, talking about um, your motive being yourself, right? Like this new way of thinking adds entirely new shades, often in blurring brushstrokes of paint that wipe out the existence of standards or cast them into a shadow that pushes them out of sight. So if one's peace, comfort, way of life, convenience, reputation, opportunities, job, happiness or even ease is threatened, just abort it. So, I see myself doing that sometimes, is like anything that I can see as an obstacle or a inconvenience or a hindrance to me achieving what I want, my comfort or um, my personal peace, I would say like I'm willing just to cut that out. I'm willing to, um, I guess, um, do whatever it takes in order to make myself comfortable, to make sure that my goals are being met. Um, so I think, yeah, man, like if I were to take that to the extreme, man, like it's just a detrimental way of allowing my lost soul to take control, um, so yeah, I just really like that, and just the way that you know you can even just deceive yourself in order to accomplish what you want, when it comes to um, acting within the lost soul. Um, so yeah, that's kind of what I have on that. That was my take on it. And so for our last question, um, how interesting was the concept of godly remorse as opposed to brokenness in the church that Dallas addresses at the end of this chapter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked how he kind of introduces it, or he's kind of in the middle of this discussion, and he brings up this concept by saying, it's common today to hear Christians talk about their brokenness, quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote. But when you listen closely, you may discover what they're talking about. They're talking about their wounds, the
Yeah.
thing they have suffered, not about the evil that is in them. And so that's what I'd say is the difference. That I was already kind of thought about this concept of like, I consider worldly sorrow, my little simple definition is being sorrowful, being sad about consequences you have to experience for destructive behavior.
Yeah.
Godly sorrow is feeling a sadness that you've betrayed the essence of good, that you have not acted in a way that is in sense of accordance of, family of God values, that you have offended the standard of good, that you have acted in a way that's not you. So in a sense, you being now restored good. So realizing evil was within you. So even like a good characteristic, like David would pray, God, search my heart. When he would ask that he desired to be good because he did not want any evil to be found in him in the first place to lead him to do certain things. So even though he did end up doing certain things, he did evil things, he did repent from it, and it showed that he truly was that good man, that was a man after God's own heart, as God described him. But a man that would do that, yeah, would have those reactions like David did when he was in sin, that it broke him to his core. Not just the consequences of behavior, yeah, that probably definitely made him feel miserable, but that he had betrayed his relationship with his father, his heavenly father, God. And so kind of my last little sentiments I'd say that kind of wraps it up is his very last paragraph. It's pretty much the entirety of what he says, that
Yeah.
he's talking about how if you don't realize this evil within you, he says that yet without this realization of our utter ruin and without the genuine uh, revising and redirecting of our lives, which that bitter realization naturally gives rise to, no clear path to inner transformation can be found. It is psychologically and spiritually impossible. We will steadfastly remain on the throne of our universe. And again, just super convicting of that.
Yeah.
Yes, we do want to believe we are part of the family of the God of the universe, and we are of royalty, we are prince. But if we truly believe, we have the audacity to say that literally this singular conscience made everything, and I am that I did talk to Moses. Like, no, you didn't. You're living right now in this period of human history, the sweetheart. So that I hear that thought of like, you claim to be, you will, if you don't realize this capacity, we have that initial lie to still captivate our hearts, that ye shall be gods. But what really Satan was tempting him with, what that really means to do that, what that really means to violate family values, how that's not being a godly individual, but how truly a godly individual is part of being a group, a family effort with a father that is our leader, that is in control, that we are the body, not that we're a wretched body, not that we're a useless body. No, we are a glorified body of that, but we have a leader. So that's the point that I say is convicting and sober by saying that he's realized if you don't realize that ruin of wanting or literally placing yourself as the center of the universe, that is how he was saying is it'll be psychologically and spiritually impossible to have what this book is all about, renovation of the heart and spiritual transformation. So just felt like that paragraph just put it perfectly. Just really truly having a sobering look at the ruined soul.
Yeah. No, I think that was good as well. And there's this other little quote here that he gave to, not a quote, but a sentence he wrote where it says, "There is little hope for genuine change in one who is without remorse, without the anguish of regret." So I guess that sounded a little negative there, but I think to kind of flip that, I can relate to it just based on my experiences with the churches I grew up in. And so I just remember we would have these times of just pretty much confession of prayers. The church would come up to the front of I guess, what would you call it, the sanctuary and
the altar.
Yeah, there's the altar. Yeah.
Altar call.
Yeah, it was sort of like the altar call, but
confession call.
Confession call, yeah. So that's really what it was. So, it being a charismatic church, we were gonna express the feelings, man. So I just remember seeing, people crying, and I hope that I was interpreting that as like really just that anguish people felt, when confessing their sin or seeking God out. And so I think I can say, like, based on seeing that, I think it gave me a good picture of what it looks like to be remorseful, to be feeling that anguish and just the pain that sin causes, and so I think that allowed me to kind of realize that, yeah, sin is bad, and we do need God to come and save us and give us grace and show us mercy. So yeah, I think I really like that. It does take some anguish, right? Otherwise, kind of like what he said, you're just confessing wounds, you're just really just acknowledging that something's there, but it's not truly turning you, how do I want to say this? Just, I guess, towards God and allowing this reformation or this regeneration. Renovation, yeah, to happen. So that's right. It's the title of the book. So
and his term is transformation. Yeah, spiritual transformation. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's what I appreciate from seeing the anguish. So I don't know if you have any more thoughts on this, but I think I'll wrap it up with that. If you got nothing else.
It's real, dude. It's just like accept it. Become what you are.
Yeah.
There's that mantra to end out the year, bro.
Nice.
Because I was gonna say that, I guess that'd be the last thought too. Is like that's truly what the sadness, like you're saying, like why the remorse is a key element. Is the sadness is just realizing like that what I'm doing right now is not allowing me to become what I am. I am this family member of God. I am this male. I am the son of God, and me participating in this behavior right now is not what a son would do. This is not maturing me into my sonship, but just truly saying like, yeah, that remorse will allow you to say, I don't want to do that anymore. This is not me. I want to be me again. I want to listen to my father. I want to follow his footsteps.
Yeah.
I was just more about just really what remorse is about and how it's like the emotion that allows you to not want to do something anymore and do something different.
For
Because I said
sure.
I'm about to go into a full remorseful period of getting intense again with some of my disciplines, but not necessarily a lot of sadness, but there was some remorse of like, I've really not been who I really am the past couple months I have been, but just as far as like execution, that there just hasn't been a standard that I normally have. But that was the remorse. Like, this is not who I am. So now I
Yeah,
need to do something dramatic to get right back onto how I normally go about life. So
that's
yeah,
right.
dude, remorse was an element of that. Not big time, but it was more like kicking me into gear though. But I can relate to that though.
Same. So yeah, I guess we'll end it here. And so again, this has been um, episode 3. I think we're on chapter 3, right? So
We're on chapter 3, but I think episode 4 at this point.
episode 4, actually. Yep, my bad. So
There
episode
you go.
4,
Video. Mm-hmm.
yeah, chapter 3 of Renovation of the Heart. So,
Yes.
as always, thumbs up if you like this video. Please leave us a comment. Yeah, please leave us a comment. We'd love to interact with whoever has any questions.
Yeah.
And
Debate.
say that again.
Oh, I was saying comment so we can debate you.
Yeah, debate you too, I guess. He would love to debate you.
No,
Yeah, no, just kidding.
Very
No, yeah, just send us your thoughts and
yeah.
see what y'all are thinking. And I also,
Big topic. So this would be one that I would love to hear comments over.
yeah, absolutely. So, and then, always subscribe. We're going to keep bringing the content. So keep joining us on
this is the beginning.
the journey. Yeah, for sure.
This is
So
the beginning. Or just like it's the re-engagement. Like we're about to turn it out.
that's
Look out,
right.
world.
Yeah, that's
Hear
right.
us eventually, whether
Yeah,
you like it or not. This train's gonna keep on moving.
that's right. We're
To
going
that
to keep
one fan
learning,
we get.
keep sharing what we're learning. So
Keep
yeah,
chugging away.
exactly. So we'll keep growing. So yeah, this has been episode 4 of Chop It Up. I'm Juan Escobar. That's Austin James. So thanks for watching. And as always, thanks for your attention. Till next time.